Hello, welcome to the video. My name's Josh, and today we'll be taking a look at the Veteran Sharpshooter from Darktide. So let's first answer the question, what is the Veteran? In a previous life, they would have been part of the Astra Militarum. Now, they could have been a commissioned officer, maybe they were a Cadian soldier, or just another rank-and-file grunt. In any case, your main role in the game is to be a ranged specialist, so this means that your weapon of choice will have a massive impact on your playstyle, likely more so than the other classes. First, let's take a look at some of the unique weapons that are accessible only to the Veteran. First, we have the plasma gun, which was a weapon that we didn't have access to in a closed beta, so I can't comment on that one too much, but it seems like it would be a good anti-armor weapon. Their other unique weapon is one that the Krieg fanboys should be getting excited for, and that's the shovel. This is a really solid weapon, surprisingly. It hits quite hard, you're able to hack enemies apart with it, you can stagger with your heavy attacks, and the special attack option is very powerful. You can basically stun lock any non-boss enemy in the game. The clip shown on screen right now was taken from either the hardest or second hardest difficulty, going off of memory, and it shows me basically permanently stun locking one of the crusher enemy types, so it's a very effective tool in your arsenal. Now, in that vein, we'll quickly touch on the other melee weapon options that the Veteran has access to. These include axes, which are great single target tools, Cadia knives, which have excellent cleave potential, and also the chainswords, which I unfortunately didn't get a chance to use during the closed test, but I have heard they're a little bit on the underpowered side, so hopefully they get a buff in the upcoming release. Now, since they are a ranged specialist, let's talk about their ranged options. So first we have the las guns. From what I played, there were 3 variants. The first 2 felt fairly similar, very much like a battle rifle or a DMR type weapon. The third one was much more of a rapid fire variant, which felt really fun to use. Next we have the auto guns. They all felt quite fun to use, and they basically function like your typical assault rifle. Then we have the auto pistol, which is basically your SMG type weapon. This one was really fun to use and probably one of my favourite weapons from the beta test. It really excels at close to medium range engagements, but seems to struggle a lot at hitting targets consistently at long ranges. Next is the revolver. It has 5 shots, hits hard, feels punchy, and has some pretty good range to it as well. This is a really solid weapon and, again, feels great to use in-game. And lastly, we have my personal favourite from the test, the shotgun. It hits hard and actually has really surprising range, to the point where if you aim down sight, this thing felt basically like a sniper rifle without the scope. It is an absolute beast of a weapon, and using the special attack button actually loads a special shell into the weapon, and on your next shot, your spread will be a little bit more of a horizontal line, which just mows through hordes. It's really satisfying to use. Now that we've gone over the weapon options, let's get into the base kit for the Veteran Sharpshooter. First we have their Blitz ability, which is Frag Grenade. This is a fragmentation grenade that explodes after a short fuse timer. This is really effective for clearing hordes and taking out unarmored targets. Next we have Scavenger Hunt. You and allies in coherency gain a small amount of ammo whenever any of you kill an elite enemy. This will be really helpful for maintaining the ammo of not just yourself but also your allies. Next we have their active ability, Volley Fire. Enter a ranged stance for 4 seconds, instantly equipping your ranged weapon and designating nearby elite and specialist enemies as priority targets. During this stance you deal plus 50% ranged damage. Now, something that's missing from this wording is after that 4 seconds has expired, you can actually continue to see the highlighted enemies for quite a while afterwards. It feels like maybe a good 10 odd seconds, so it is very strong, but just getting that extra burst damage to quickly take down an elite or special enemy is really helpful. Next we have their iconic feats. The Sharpshooter comes with 2. The first one is Make Every Shot Count. This gives a plus 15% weak spot damage boost. So this will really incentivize making sure you're hitting those headshots. and the second is Be Prepared. Increase ammo reserve for all ranged weapons by 75%. So this one's really great for the veteran, since as a ranged specialist you'll be using your gun quite frequently, and having that reserve ammo just means that you won't have to worry about running out as often. So that covers their base kit, which can't be adjusted. Now let's get into their customizable feat options. These are unlocked every 5 levels up to level 30. There are 3 from each column. You can select 1 from each column, and you can swap out your feats at any time in between missions, but not during a mission. On their first level 5 row, they have their feats, which are based around regaining their toughness, which is basically your shield mechanic. Firstly, we have Confirmed Kill, replenish plus 50% toughness on elite kill, and a further 50% toughness over time. Next, we have Exhilarating Takedown, replenish 20% toughness on ranged weak spot kill, and At Arm's Length, replenish 7% toughness per second while more than 8 meters from enemies. So your choice in this role is going to be heavily dependent upon your playstyle and skill level. I'd say if you're able to consistently snipe elites before anyone else can get the kill, Confirmed Kill would be a great option, and if you're able to consistently hit those headshots, Exhilarating Takedown would also be good. I'd say the safest option is At Arm's Length, since that's just a passive regeneration as long as you're at a decent range from enemies. Next we have their level 10 feat options. The first one is Sniper. Deal up to 25% increased damage based on the distance between you and the target. Then Tactical Reload, plus 20% reload speed if you still have ammo in your weapon. And Demolition Stockpile, replenish 1 grenade every 45 seconds. So for this column, I believe a lot of people are going to gravitate towards Sniper for the damage increase. That one's going to be really good for those harder hitting weapons, or if you do need to hit certain breakpoints. Tactical Reload would also be a good one depending on your weapon, especially if you do need to reload quite frequently. However, Demolition Stockpile is actually a really interesting one, since you can actually store up to 4 grenades as the veteran, so you're able to throw out your grenades quite frequently and just passively regenerate them. This also means that you don't need to specifically pick up grenade boxes throughout the mission, and you can leave those for your allies to pick up so that they can in turn use their own grenades more frequently. Next up we have the level 15 column. This column seems to be more focused on teamwork options. So first up we have Bio-Optic Targeting. Volley Fire now highlights enemies for all allies in coherency. Then we have Demolition Team. You and allies in coherency have an 8% chance to gain a grenade on enemy kill. And we have Covering Fire. When you kill an enemy with a ranged attack, allies in melee range of the target replenish 4% toughness. So from this column, Bio-Optic Targeting is going to be really helpful, since the visibility of specialists and elites can be quite tricky and hard to spot, and also the tagging system was a little bit janky in the closed beta test. So being able to highlight specialists and elite enemies, not just for yourself but your team as a whole, is going to be a really helpful feature. Demolition Team is also really handy, since your own frag grenades can clear out hordes, so having more of them is always a good thing. But actually getting grenades back for your allies is also really important, especially for the Zealots, since they have probably the most clutch grenade in the game, where they can throw it out, stun enemies in a large area, and start reviving teammates with ease. And Covering Fire is also quite interesting, since I could see situations occurring where an ally might be stuck in melee combat and having a bit of a tough time, and you could just unload with an auto gun or some sort of rapid fire weapon and just take down the horde and get all their toughness back. Next we have the level 20 column. We have Unwavering Focus. This gives a plus 75% toughness damage reduction from ranged attacks during volley fire. Then we have Duck and Dive. Dodging, sprinting or sliding to avoid ranged attacks grants 20% stamina. And Camo Expert. While standing still, enemies are significantly less likely to target you. So for this column, Unwavering Focus is going to be a really solid pick, since you'll be able to mitigate ranged damage taken while you just focus down an elite or special enemy. Duck and Dive is a bit of an odd one, since I don't see too many uses for it outside of being able to rush down and get within melee range of shooting enemies and force them into melee combat. But as the Veteran and as a range specialist, I don't see why you'd be wanting to do that frequently, so it's a bit of an odd pick, but maybe as the game unfolds it'll have some other options which will show themselves in time. And as for Camo Expert, this one requires a little bit of speculation on my part, since I couldn't find any info online about how this functions exactly. So since enemies are less likely to target you while you stand still, this could potentially be extremely powerful or incredibly weak, just depending on how the targeting actually works. Next, we'll move on to the level 25 feats. First we have Frag Storm. Frag grenades apply 1 stack of bleed to all enemies hit. Then we have Deadshot. While using your ranged weapon's alternate fire, you have 25% increased critical chance and 95% reduced sway, and lose 10% stamina every second. And lastly, One After Another, which is plus 50% of reload speed on elite kill. So for Frag Storm, the power of this one will really depend on how much damage the bleed does over time, but given that you can stack up quite a few grenades and regain them quite quickly with some of the previous feats, you should be able to throw out multiple grenades at a time, causing a lot of initial damage from the explosions and then stacking up a lot of these bleed stacks. Deadshot is another interesting one. I believe when it mentions the alternate fire, it is referring to aiming down sight for the weapon. So this is probably similar to other shooters where when you aim down sight with a sniper, you can hold your breath to steady your shot. But this is coming with the added benefit of also increasing your critical hit chance, so that's quite a powerful feat. And the last one, One After Another, is going to be very weapon dependent. It's going to really excel on those weapons that have a low ammo capacity but a high damage output. That way you can just point and click at an elite and then quickly reload the weapon. And now we'll finally move on to the level 30 talent row. First we have Crackshot, plus 75% armor penetration during volley fire. Then we have Killing Machine. Killing an enemy highlighted by volley fire refreshes volley fire's duration. And lastly, Deadly Focus. During volley fire you have plus 95% reduced sway, and plus 75% reduced recoil, and plus 95% reduced spread. So Crackshot's going to be a really solid pick if you do have a weapon that doesn't have that armor penetration. That way you'll be able to just burst into a heavily armored elite enemy. Also, it's a little bit unclear, but this feat may actually work for your grenades as well as your standard guns. So you might be able to just deal with those heavily armored elites a bit easier by just tossing a bunch of grenades at them when using this feature. Also, Killing Machine is a really solid pick from this column. I believe it's going to work really well with high damage and high accuracy weapons. That way you'll be able to just keep picking off elite and specialist enemies and constantly resetting the extra damage from focused fire. And as for Deadly Focus, this will work really well with those fully automatic weapons, since you'll be able to control your weapon much easier. It'll also be interesting to see how it interacts with the shotgun, since the 95% reduced spread could make the shotgun very effective at extreme ranges. I already mentioned how it does work quite well at long range already, but this should make it even more effective at those longer ranges. I also think this is going to be a really good general pick for nearly every weapon, since being able to reduce the sway you receive from getting shot at by ranged enemies is going to be really important. That way you can keep firing back with some good consistent accuracy. Now, before we finish up the video, I did want to touch on a few of the different feat synergies that I've noticed that would allow you to create some interesting builds. So the first one is the sniper build. So for the first column, this is all personal preference, but confirmed kill would likely be a good option. Then in the second column, sniper, for the increased damage based on your distance between you and the target. On the third row, this one's also a bit subjective, but bio-optic targeting would be handy since you'd be able to help your teammate also see those enemies that you're trying to fire at. And on the fourth column, Camo Expert would probably be your best pick, assuming that it works the way that it's worded. If not, Unwavering Focus may be a better option. On the 5th row, Deadshot is likely going to be really solid for trying to snipe those enemies, but one after another could also be good, depending on how frequently you need to reload your weapon. And on the final row, Killing Machine is probably going to be your best pick as a sniper. That way you can just keep picking off those elite and specialists consistently while maintaining that increased damage from volley fire. And I believe this would also extend the duration of being able to view the highlighted targets quite significantly. Also, Deadly Focus may be another option, just depending on if you picked one after another or not. That way you can reduce that sway. The second build option I noticed would be for the Grenadier build. So in the second column, you'd want to pick Demolition Stockpile. That way you're constantly regenerating your grenades. Then from the third column, you'd want to pick Demolition Team. That way you're getting even more grenades back quite consistently on enemy kills, and also grenades for your team. For the fourth column, this one is really personal preference since there's not a lot of synergies here, but I believe Duck and Dive might be a good option since it might make it easier to keep up with your team, that way everyone's staying in the coherency area. On the fifth column, Fragstorm is the clear choice, so this gives your grenades a stack of bleed to enemies hit. Again, the power of this one really depends on how much damage the bleed stacks actually deal over time, but typically this is going to be a really solid synergy for your other grenade options. And on the last column, I believe Crackshot is going to be your best pick. Again, it's a little bit unclear if this actually applies to your grenade damage, but based on the wording, I believe it would, so this could be very solid. And for the last build that I came up with, this is the Gunner, so this is focused around using high fire rate weapons. So in the second column, you'd want to pick Tactical Reload, that way you're able to reload your weapon quite quickly. In the third column, Covering Fire, since a lot of the high fire rate weapons are going to be great for taking down hordes very quickly, so if you have a teammate that's struggling a little bit inside of a horde, just spray and pray into the horde and that should get your teammate back a bit of toughness. In the fourth column, we have Unwavering Focus. This is going to let you deal with copping some shots from time to time from ranged fire. And on the fifth row, one after another is going to be really solid for when you do take down an elite. That way you can just quickly swap out your magazine and get some fresh ammo going. And as an alternative pick on that column, Deadshot is another really solid option, partly because of the sway reduction, but mostly for the increased critical hit chance. Since you'll likely want to use a full auto weapon with this build, you'll be getting a lot of critical hits in rapid succession, which should add up to being some very substantial damage dealt in a short period of time. And on the final row for the Gunner build, I would say Deadly Focus is your best pick, since you'll be reducing your sway, your recoil, and your spread. That way your typically fully auto guns that might struggle to hit things at long range should be able to just narrow down and take out those long ranged enemies. And as an alternative pick for that row, I believe Crackshot would also be a really good option, since a lot of the full auto guns don't actually have good armor penetration. So with this, you'll be able to really just burst down those elite targets very easily. Alright, that concludes my overview of the Veteran Sharpshooter. In my next video, I'll be covering the Ogre and Skullbreaker. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, it really helps out since I'm a new channel. Thanks for watching guys, and have a good one.